Another said, I give you the gift, or a third fairy gave the child the gift of beauty. A fourth gave her riches, and on it went, for each fairy giving everything in the world that one could wish for. 11 of the fairies had given their gifts, and the 12th was just about to speak when suddenly in came the 13th fairy, the one who had been left out. She was very angry, and she cried out in a loud voice, "When the princess is 15 years of age, she shall prick herself with a spindle and die." Without another word, the angry fairy left the hall. Everyone was terrified at what she had said. Then the 12th fairy came forward and said, "I cannot undo the evil spell, but I can soften it. Here then is my gift to the child. The princess shall not die, but she will fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. The king was determined to protect his child. Surely, he said, my daughter cannot prick herself with a spindle if she never sees one. So he gave an order that every spindle in the kingdom should be burned. The princess grew up, and all the fairies' gifts to the child were plain to see. She was good, wise, kind, and beautiful. Everyone who saw her loved her. On the day she turned 15, the king and queen were away from the palace. The princess was left on her own, and she wandered about the palace looking to all sorts of places and peeking into rooms that she had never explored before. She climbed a narrow, winding stair that led to a little door with a rusty key sticking out of the lock. She turned the key, and the door opened, and there in a little room sat an old woman with a spinning wheel, busily spinning away. Good day, said the princess, entering the room. What are you doing?
Oh.
What are you doing? I'm spinning, said the old woman. The princess stretched forth her hand and asked, What is this thing that spins around so merrily? But hardly had she spoken when she pricked her finger on the spinning wheel spindle, and at that very moment she fell into a deep sleep. At the same time, sleep fell upon everyone in the palace. The king and queen, who had just come home and were in the great hall, fell fast asleep. The horses in their stalls, the dogs in their yards, the pigeons on the roof, all fell asleep. Even the fire on the hearth went out. The wind stopped, and not a leaf fell from the trees. In time, a hedge of thorns began to grow around the castle, which grew thicker and higher every year until at last nothing could be seen of the castle, not even the flags on the highest towers. As the years passed, stories spread throughout the land of a beautiful princess sleeping behind a wall of thorns. Many a young prince came, but none could break through the thorns. But at long last, after many, many years, there came into the country a king's son who heard an old man tell that there was a castle standing behind the hedges of thorns, and that there a beautiful enchanted princess lay sleeping. The prince said, I shall make my way through and see the lovely princess. The old man warned him that many had tried and failed, but the prince would not listen. For now the 100 years were at an end, and the day had come for the sleeping princess to be awakened. When the prince drew near the hedge of thorns, it changed into a hedge of beautiful flowers, which bent aside to let him pass. When he reached the castle yard, he saw the horses and dogs lying asleep, and on the roof the pigeons were sitting with their heads under their wings. As he entered the castle and climbed the steps, the prince saw everyone still sleeping. The king, the queen, the cook, the maids, everyone. All was so quiet that he could hear his own breathing. At last the prince went up the narrow, winding stair and came to the room where the princess was sleeping. When he saw her looking so lovely in her sleep, he could not turn his eyes away. He bent down and kissed her, and she opened her eyes and smiled at him. Together they went down the stairs, and they saw the king and queen waking up, and all the people in the castle waking up and looking at each other in great surprise. The horses in the yard got up and shook themselves. The dogs sprang up and wagged their tails. The pigeons on the roof flew into the fields. Even the kitchen fire leapt up and blazed. At last the wedding of the prince and princess was held with great feasting and rejoicing, and they lived happily ever after, together for the rest of their days.